Hamsa. Every breath is affirming the simple awareness, the bare awareness of I am that. I am that means all, everything, nothing left out. I am that. That's the awareness of pure being. You can call it Shiva consciousness, you can call it Buddha mind, call it anything, but it's beyond words, beyond description. But by being informed by that, by coming back to rest in that, moment by moment, here and there throughout the day, that's what it means to take refuge in the practices and then have the mind attuned to them so that after a while they begin to spontaneously arise when we need them to, without even having to think, oh, I better do a practice now. You become so immersed in it, the practice is sustaining you below that level of the ordinary mind. This was really struck me one time. This was decades ago. And we were living in Philadelphia. I was helping to run the Philadelphia ashram at the time. And unfortunately, I had a health issue, and I had an emergency hospitalization because of kidney stones, and very painful. And as it was happening, I began to hear mantras arising inside, in my awareness. And I began to hear this almost like a celestial choir chanting. And so it helped me to be able to cope with it. But then as I got into the ER, and then they took me in to begin a treatment, something went wrong. And they thought I was going into anaphylactic shock. I became paralyzed. I was having difficulty breathing. I couldn't speak at all. And yet at the same time, this exquisite chant was going on. It just continued. And all I could hear was the mantra. And I wanted to pour the nurse, you know, they're calling a code and stat this and stat that. And I was trying to keep my eyes open. I kept fading away into the mantra, into that divine presence. And I wanted to reassure the nurse and the doctors, I'm okay, I'm okay. I don't know what's going on physically, but I'm okay. And finally, I closed my eyes and just disappeared into that. And after some time, 2 hours, 3 hours later, I awoke in a recovery room, and they told me what had happened, and I tried to tell them what had happened. But to me, this is the power of the practice. This is the power of mantra. You know, so mantra is not like any other ordinary language, ordinary words, ordinary sounds. The power of mantra lies in the fact that it really is a throb of the infinite. When we say take refuge in the mantra, you're taking refuge in the divine presence. You're taking refuge in the power, the presence of the infinite to embrace us. It doesn't necessarily mean that the body is suddenly free of whatever it's going to go through. I actually had more kidney stone attacks, so I know it didn't heal that. But it took me to a place beyond any suffering, any pain. So coming back to taking refuge in the mantra over and over and over throughout the day, this is one of the most powerful means that we're given to be able to move through everyday life with all its ups and downs, and especially at a time like this, where we need, where our heart, our soul, our mind is clamoring for a refuge. We can find it in meditative practice and in the power of mantra. That's what then gives us access to the compassion, the love, the kindness, the wisdom, the equanimity, to move into the world and move through it and be of service. You know, that's what we were talking about last week when we were talking about the mantra of the Heart Sutra, that its whole purpose and power is to help calm the mind so that we get free of all the things we so automatically identify with. And the mind identifies with every thought, every feeling, every agitation, every fear, every projection of the fear, every remembrance of something that was off. That's what the mind does. To free it, to start to cut through that habit, that compulsion of the mind to identify with everything that is mere content, and to discover the boundlessness, the spaciousness, the infinitude of being. That's our heart. That's the heart of the divine. That's the heart of you. That's the heart of practice, is coming to know that and live through that. Live it into the world. So we may just discover for moments here and there on a meditation seat or on a walk or out in nature or with a loved one. But the practices empower us to become more and more steady. They talk about steady wisdom, so that that knowing, that pure knowing of that all this, that everyone is the divine, that this is all the unfolding of the divine, which the mind can't accept. The mind goes, no, the divine is just supposed to be the good stuff. No, that's not how it is. The infinite creates the infinite. That's the opening mantras. Om Purnamada, Purnamidam. Out of the infinite comes the infinite, and the infinite remains. Out of the infinite comes the infinite flow of thoughts, feelings, all the events of life. And yet that infinitude of being that holds it all in a loving embrace, that can empower us to have steady wisdom in the face of these things. That's what practices support us in doing. And that's why in all traditions, Buddhist traditions, yogic traditions, Hindu traditions, Christian traditions, Kabbalah traditions, Sufi traditions, taking refuge in the name, taking refuge and doing the practices that bring us there is what begins to change the composition of the mind. It's often likened to when you dip a cloth in dye. You know, it might start out pure white, and then you dip it in the dye and it turns pink, and then you dip it in the dye, now it gets a little darker pink, and then finally it becomes red like the color of the dye. We have to dip the mind over and over again into the infinite expanse, the ocean of the divine, so that it becomes permeated with that. So that as we encounter these things, that wisdom arises. We're used to the mind thinking it has to do everything, that its job is to do this. And certainly for a long time, that's what we're doing when we're cultivating the practices. There's that level of engagement of the mind doing. And that's why it's called right action, right practice, right effort. But there comes a time when now that flow is spontaneously arising, spontaneously embracing, spontaneously moving us beyond the suffering and the pain that we can experience. So we stay with the practice, we cultivate the practices in order to have that spontaneous unfolding moment by moment, day by day. The power behind that, of course, in the yogic tradition is known as Kundalini. Kundalini is the power of the infinite for revelation and transformation. It's an innate power to every single human being. And whether we call it that from the yogic tradition, or we call it Shekinah and the Jewish tradition, or we call it Buddha mind in that tradition, it doesn't matter the name. It's that living throb of awareness, of consciousness that is always free, always unbounded. That's why Buddha talked about the four immeasurables: the boundless love, the boundless compassion, right? The boundless equanimity, the boundless wisdom. Those aren't mind generated, right? We're so used to the mind thinking it has to do everything. It can't generate infinitude. It can't generate boundless love. It generates some love and kindness. It's conditional, you know, and it often gets perturbed or gets lost. But it practices, that's all good. That cultivates the patterns that we need, so that as that's arising more from just the source of our being, it has a place to flow through into this world. So the practices are that kind of transformation that's relying on really the root power that's inherent in the practices. And the root power inherent in mantra is Shakti Kundalini. All mantras arise from that power. And that's why it has the power to dissolve the mind, because that same power is the source of mind. Right? The mind is mantra. In the Shiva Sutras, it says the mind is mantra. What does that mean? Well, it means it's arising from the same place. But now it's arising with a limited I awareness, the limited consciousness of identification with the body, with the mind, with the roles that we play as husband and wife, son, daughter, etc. That's limited I awareness. The profound I am that boundless awareness that's in mantra, that's the root of all mantra, that's the awareness of the infinite. And so just as we've spent lifetimes exploring what it is to know the finite, to know what it is to inhabit one form after another, even in the course of one lifetime, we inhabit different roles, different relationships, different jobs, different identifications we put on. Think of the different identifications we put on when we put on certain clothes or take off certain clothes and shed them. And that's why it's often used as a metaphor in the Shaivite tradition of, oh, we have to shed the clothes, the malas that bind and limit our consciousness, so that what's innate, what's under that, the boundless freedom of awareness, then we have access to that. So in these times, as challenging and difficult as they are, to remember that for the infinite, it's all being held in that loving embrace. So if we can come home to that, we can start to feel that, and then be able to come into, the everyday world empowered. Not empowered like, oh, I can do anything. No, empowered with wisdom, empowered with love, empowered with compassion. That's what we need to bring into this world, and have our actions and taking actions to reflect that. So over and over again, taking refuge, the highest dharma, in a sense, is to really imbibe and live the practices, to do the practices. The little practices, as well as, oh yeah, I'm going to sit for a bit. What's the mind doing the rest of the day? Because if we can keep it coming back to the Hammmm and the Sa, if we keep coming back to Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, with the awareness of I am Shiva, the auspicious one, I am the infinite, then that begins to really transform the mind and the body. Or Om Kalima, Om Kalima, Om Kalima. Invoking the great mother who embraces all, uplifts all, removes the obstacles. Om Kalima, Om Kalima. So bring the mind back to the power of mantra, because mantra is then able to dissolve the mind and bring us back not only to our source, that source is actually the same source as mantra, the divine within. So as we become more and more absorbed in meditation and mantra, the mantra begins to shed its form, so that then what's there is just the stillness, just the spaciousness of being, nothing left out. But it's in that stillness, in that silence, that true wisdom is known. What the mind knows, that's not the depths of wisdom. The depths of wisdom unfold in silence, in stillness. So we go there. Along the way, we get whiffs of that wisdom. We get whiffs of that inspiration. So even if we haven't become absolutely still or silent in meditation, we can feel the energy. We can feel the upliftment that comes with just having really attuned ourselves. Mantra is like a tuning fork, and it helps to attune the mind to what its source is and what lies beyond the mind. So taking refuge in mantra over and over and over again, whether it's through practices of chanting, meditation, chanting out loud, chanting in the mind, all of these are ways that we can really become immersed in it. But one of the critical dimensions of it is to do with the awareness of I am that, the Hamsa awareness. Because it's not the mantra is a separate thing from you and it's separate from God or the divine. These are all just one. You, the infinite, the mantra, one one throb, one pulsation. It's all there is. So when we take refuge in the mantra, we also want to cultivate that understanding, because the mind divides things up and separates them. That's its job. That's the dharma of the mind. It's an instrument for being divisive, for separating things out. To know the finite means to know the particulars. To know the particulars means to know this is different from that. That is what the mind affords us. But to know the infinite, to know the unity, to know the one that has become the many, then we have to let the mind dissolve. It'll come back again. But now we come back to it with some distance.